a little bit drunk on his way home from a celebration, knocks a young boy off his bike and puts him in a bad way. Unlike movies or stories where a character kills someone and then runs home and hides under their bed, I was interested in a more subtle thing, which is if you were to do that and still perform your duty of care, in this instance my character stops to help the child or call an ambulance and does those things that you would consider right. The wrong thing that he does is he doesn't own up to being the cause of the accident.
And he's a policeman, of course.
And he's a detective, which means that he's on that blue line. And as someone who is usually the person that deals out the law and rubs shoulders with other people that deal out the law, he finds himself in a situation where the first lie that he tells then gets picked up by everybody around him, and his senior detective, who's the most vocal at the scene of the crime, senses what's going on between the cracks, or between the lines, and helps him through the investigation, which really puts a spotlight on this question, which is very important to us, myself and Matthew, the director, which is a conversation about what punishment fits what crime, and culpability and intent behind crime, and how do you rejoin the human race after you've committed a bad act or a bad crime.
I'll come back to that point about being out of the human race in a second. But when I walked out of the cinema, I kept thinking about all the crap things I'd done in my life and how possibly I could have wrecked mine or other lives.
Yeah.
Is that what you want people to do when they come out?
I definitely want people to have an examination of their own relationship with their ethics. I definitely want to put people in the driver's seat, so to speak, and question their own point of view, or to really understand themselves and their own integrity. And really the whole film to me is about integrity. The integrity to tell the truth, the integrity to take responsibility for your actions. And it's a very relatable and common feeling that we have as we move through our day. It's like, particularly let's talk about driving a motor vehicle. The amount of people that drive under the influence of alcohol, texting and making phone calls and driving. You're driving a massive piece of machinery, and you're constantly butting up against other people's lives and their safety. We are always that close to causing damage.
Some of the questions, the writing, which was yours in the screenplay, they're questions that really resonate with somebody all through life. Did anyone see you? It's the right thing to do. I told the first lie. We can live with this. How hard did you work to get those particular sentences exactly right?
We wanted to get a real accurate sense of different points of view on this same incident. And I became fascinated, for example, with this idea of guilt. This sort of mathematical equation of guilt intensifying with witnesses. When I was asking the question, why do we tell these lies? Why do people in these moments of these kind of shocking moments where they cause the damage, if there's no witness, why do they run away? Why do they tell a lie? And I kept coming back to this feeling like nobody wants to be judged, nobody wants to be seen as a bad person, and no one wants to be unlikable or unloved.
Or maybe it's just a matter of survival. We tell lies to preserve ourselves, to survive.
But what is the preservation about? What are we preserving? Are we preserving our status? We're preserving our family life, we're preserving our career. What we're doing is preserving the track we're on. And to me, part of that preservation, and the reason we want to stay on that track, is because on that track we're okay. On that track nobody's judging us. On that track nobody thinks we're a bad person.
Again, was there a particular incident that you witnessed or you saw that you then turned into this film? What was at the back of your mind?
No, I've never, thankfully, I'm going to find some wood, I'm sure there's down there, never been in this incident, but I have been definitely in my mind as a human who is constantly running the worst case scenario reel in my head, cast myself in those situations. And a lot of the stuff, the first movie I wrote was called The Square, and The Square was a similar thing. I'd read the newspaper and look at what other people had done. You know, when other people do bad things, you read about it in the newspaper. And sometimes they're just little stories, you know, and there's so many hit-and-run incidents, so many of them, where people don't perform their duty of care, they run away. And I was like, where does that come from? Because as an actor, I'm always searching for the reason to understand a character. I don't believe people are bad. I just believe that in some circumstances, people make bad decisions.
Because do you remember a few years ago in this country, there was the former High Court judge who got speeding fines and said it was a friend of his who turned out to be
dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that one of those situations where you try to cover up for the sake of survival and status? And I wonder, did that even have an influence on you at all in writing?
All of those stories kind of, you know, in some, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, but in those instances where no one's being damaged or hurt or dying, I do get a kind of a cheeky enjoyment out of those things, reminding me that what we're writing is happening all the time. And to me, that situation was someone trying to sort of just dig their way out of a bad situation. They're just digging themselves a deeper and deeper hole.
So do you think your interest in this whole area of ethics and morality goes beyond your work as an actor? Is there some sort of religious or some kind of connotation from your childhood, I wonder?
I do think that there's something, you know, in me that is constantly battling with integrity in minor ways. I think that's one thing, you know. This sort of striving and searching to be a good person all the time and occasionally feeling like you fall short. You know, you fall into that I'm being too selfish in this instance, I should be more open-minded and generous, I should be more charitable, all that stuff.
Is that the message going on in your head all the time?
Yeah, I mean, not all the time. I do have moments where I mean, it's a conversation or a kind of a thing that occurs to me quite a lot, not all the time. You know, I did my Holy Communion when I was a kid. I had, you know, I remember quite immediately grabbing hold of this idea that I was always being watched by God, you know, because it's one of the early things that God sees everything. You know, the first person that sees everything is Santa Claus. Yeah, but then I realised I won't say that because I don't want anybody to watch it. But you know, the idea that everything you do is being watched in that religious context, you know, and then you talk about concepts of guilt and concepts of, you know, moving towards heaven or moving towards hell according to what your actions are. Now, those things aren't important to me on a conscious level anymore, and that's just a personal thing, but definitely the seeds of what I learnt, I think, are still driving me, but I don't necessarily think they're religious per se, because I truly believe that the majority of human beings have a relationship with guilt or karma or whatever you call it, that they know when they're doing the right thing and they know when they're doing the wrong thing.
So would you ever reject an acting role for ethical or moral reasons?
It depends. And what it depends on is what the overall message of the movie is.
Would you, for example, if you'd been Eric Bana some years ago, would you have played Chopper?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you an example of where I may not have chosen to take a role. Now, I did a movie called Zero Dark 30, and I was the leader of the SEAL team that killed bin Laden. Now, if that film had been a film that some part, the the sum total of its parts said, war is great, and look how great we are as a nation, and we're the mightiest people, and war is great. Whatever, if that was the message, I would never have played a part in that movie. Now, I'm sure if Russell Crowe did Romper Stomper and it was saying, it's great to be a skinhead and it's awesome, you should go out and kick the heads of anyone who's not racially the same as you, I'm sure he would never have done that movie. However, he was playing a role in the context of a movie that had a different message. That's where ethics come into acting, I think.
I want to go back to your early days as a kid. You have a brother, Nash, who's also in the film industry. He was a stuntman, I think, on Felony and has a film company.
Yeah.
How did both of you grow up interested in films when I think your dad was a solicitor, wasn't he?
Yeah, Dad was a solicitor at the time.
And what did your mum do?
She was a mum and looked after two, looking after Nash and I, that's a job. I mean, seriously. So we had a really nice life, actually. I often joke that, at drama school and learning to be an actor, everybody's like, yeah, if you get really tortured, then life as an actor could be really good because you'll have experienced so much, and that wasn't the case with us at all. So, I mean, I just liked movies. I wasn't thinking about being a filmmaker back then.
So that wasn't a sort of, you both didn't set out to be the Coen brothers or, anything great in the film world. It just happened that way?
No,
I know Nash started to make films for Tropfest, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he was going to be an electrical engineer. I think a lot of career stuff in our generation was tougher than it is now. And I only say that because we didn't have the internet to go and learn about what was out there. You had a careers advisor at school, but it was very limited.
So what were you advised to do?
Well, the way I describe careers advising in a way is like, if there's like a whole lot of colours on the spectrum and all the colours in between all the colours on the spectrum and all the shades of all the colours in between all the colours of the spectrum, the amount of careers and weird and wonderful things you can do out there, the spectrum is radical. Whereas it felt to me like we were just showing the basic colours, There's law and there's medicine and there's this and there's that. All that other weird and wonderful stuff that we discovered later wasn't really there for the offering. It didn't seem that way. But now if you have the internet, you could squirrel around and find all sorts of stuff. Now, to me, I wanted to be an artist. I mean, I was going to go to art school. I was going to go to fine art school. And then I thought, because I had to, be sensible and find a career that had money, like that ensured that I would earn money, fine art turned into, maybe I'll go to design school. Nothing against design, but what I really wanted to do was paint pictures. And then I thought maybe if I went into the advertising side of things. But the other thing on my mind was acting. And I thought, I've got to get that out of my system now and just have a look, just explore it. And I did that, and then I've never stopped. But funnily enough, I paint now. It's terrible. It's not terrible, but it's personal. I still paint, and I imagine myself living part-time on a farm when I'm older.
Is that right?
With just paint everywhere. In fact, I got paint on my fingernails now.
So I heard that when you were a child, you kept a notebook and you kept in it ideas, and you were going to make those ideas into film when you got older. What kind of things did you collect?
Well, it was more a case of, I didn't realise how early I'd started writing until, because when I left drama school, we started making our own short films, and then my brother was like, we've got to make a movie, and I thought, well, I'll write it for you. And I thought, this is when I started being a writer. And it wasn't until later that I looked back and saw just how much I used to write stuff, and I have these notebooks full of silly little comedies things, and I'd helped write the review we did in the end of high school, and I think I just realised I'd been writing for a long time, but I never really knew what it was going to be. I used to write stuff on pieces of paper all over the place. I've got boxes of stuff. One day when I have time, I'm going to go through it all And I'm sure when I go through it, I'll just laugh, but who knows, I might find fun little things to keep a hold of.
The Square was your first feature that you'd written.
Again, about integrity, yeah.
Is this going to be a theme you think that follows you throughout your career?
I don't know. I think so. I mean, look, for a start, I love watching movies where characters are lying. You know, the drama involved with deception is very rich, and there's a lot to be mined from it. But on a personal level, when I write this stuff, it's interesting. You often don't know until you look back and see a commonality. And I look back at The Square, and then I look at Felony, and then I look at the next thing I want to make. And like, there's definitely a thematic similarity there, which is people doing the wrong thing, choosing to lie about it, and then watching their life unravel and desperately trying to claw back to a place of integrity. And I also think that if I ever discovered why I write that, I'd probably stop writing about it.
Do you purposely switch between blockbusters and films back in Australia for a reason, or is that just depending on how the work comes?
It's sort of the way the work comes. I don't choose actively. It's so weird, you know, like I had a young actor asked me the other day on the street, they just graduated from drama school, if there's any sort of advice you give. And it's so difficult to map a journey from the beginning looking forward as an actor. It's more that you look back and wonder and marvel at how it all even worked, because you bumped into this person, you happen to start working in, you know, this place, you met this person, together you collaborated, that pushed you forward, and then you met this person, and everybody's path is unique. Now, in terms of mapping your career out, it's wonderful to say you map it out, but you don't really get to map it out until you have the power to say no. And assuming that when you have the power to say no, alongside that you have options. So then you like, what are my options? No, 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 yes, and then you move forward. And it's like a board game. It's like moving forward around Monopoly or Trivial Pursuit. No, 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 yes. All right, I'll move forward 4 steps. Then you do another thing and you go backwards. You know, you get sent to jail because you do a bad movie. You know what I mean? So it's that weird, personal, unique stepping forward, and you choose things accordingly. Now, I don't choose a big movie for the sake of it being a big movie or a small movie because I'm feeling like I want to satisfy my artistic tendencies. It's really about script and timing.
You didn't say no to Ridley Scott. Did you ask him why he cast you in Exodus?
No.
Do you ever ask directors why they cast you?
No, but I ask that question in my own head. I often feel like that question asked out loud to a director is makes
dangerous?
It makes you at risk of sort of self-doubt, and I like to keep self-doubt to myself.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't mind telling him about it afterwards. Like, I don't mind telling someone I was terrified after I've already finished the job. But I don't want to go into something and say to someone, I don't know if I can do this and I'm terrified. And that's always things I feel that I keep to myself. And I always feel like you need a certain element of that going into a job. Anyway, and look, I know the answer to some of those questions too. And unfortunately, well, taking ego out of it, the reason I do a lot of jobs, or directors ask me to do a lot of jobs, and this goes for most actors, is that they've asked X, Y, and Z first. No, I'm not being self-deprecating or overly modest or anything. I can guarantee if you dug into the files at Fox or the files at, you know, Warner Brothers for Gatsby or anything, that, you know, there was like a number of actors that were part of the conversation that couldn't do it or didn't want to do it, and they go down the chain. I remember being in the back of a car with Guy Pearce and Rachel Griffiths when we shot The Hard Word, and I was sitting next to Damien Richardson, a lovely actor from Melbourne, and he and I were both like, you know, new at the game, listening to Guy and Rachel laughing about who has to say no to a job before they get it. And that's the way it's always been. And that's part of the beauty of it. And you can't have ego about it. I mean, why would I say, oh, so they wanted this person, that person, that person, so I wasn't their first choice? It's not like you're being invited to the prom, you know what I mean, or the formal. It's not like you should go, oh, you only want to go with me because, Darren and Mike and Bob said no.
So would the same go for you if you had wanted a role and you don't get it?
Absolutely. I get really belligerent about that. But I stopped getting belligerent about it once I'd stepped behind the camera and realised that really they just give the job to the best person if they can get that person. So I stopped getting upset. What I stopped getting upset about was not getting a part that I wasn't right for. Because as a young actor, you're like, I can do anything, give it to me, I'll play a coffee cup, let me do it. And then they give the job to the coffee cup, and you're like, but I could have done that, I could have been. And you're like, well, okay, the camera looks at you and you're not a coffee cup, so get over it. And I remember losing a job to someone who was supposed to be, blue-blooded, Eton-educated, British, playing the youngest Prime Minister of Britain. And I didn't get the job, and I was like, of course I didn't get the job. I could act the part, but the kid that came along and did the part, he'd been there. He was that kid. I think Peter Weir had this beautiful thing that he said about casting. I met him once at the Sydney Theatre Company, and we were talking in the midst of me and my brother casting a square. And he'd written an essay about casting, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said that the role in the film is like a crime, and finding the right actor for the role is like finding the person who committed that crime. And he said that the majority of the time you only find someone who is the most likely suspect, but every now and then you find someone who has blood on their hands. And what he means is sometimes an actor will walk through the door and you go, that is exactly who is on the page. And so, anyway, that's a long way of saying my ego in response to not getting certain jobs is changed, and I understand the business better, which is sometimes I'm not as valuable as the next guy.
Interesting.
I will be.
You better believe it.
That's my mission. I'm going up there.
Joel, what does home mean to you?
Home, to me, it's about family and friends, comfortability, familiarity, routine, and it makes me feel very comfortable. I start to notice it more and more because I go away for more and more time, and when I touch down in Sydney, it just makes me feel very good.
So it's definitely Australia is part of your equation of home.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I don't know, I imagine that would be the same for everybody. I've had a nice time of things over in America, but it's interesting that in the 12 or 13 years that I've been going there, longer almost, it took until 6 years ago for me to even sign a lease to live in a house there. And it took me till 2 years ago to even consider buying somewhere there. But I've never spent more than 4 or 5 months consecutively living there. I've been doing a job for that long, but as soon as I get a chance, I come home.
I know you've got a long career ahead of you.
I hope so.
But just imagine you're 80.
Yeah.
And you look back. How would you like people to think about your body of work? What does success mean?
If I'd be 80 looking back, I hope that I would have directed a handful of movies and written a handful of things and continued to be an actor. I'd hope that as much as I would have entertained people, because I'm not averse to entertainment, obviously I'm in the entertainment business, but there's something important about some of the work, at least, that there's, like with Felony, there's something we're handing over that is, to me, is important. So there's that. And as an actor, on a vanity level, I'd like to think that this is what I have an image of, and I know this, and I fully, openly admit that this may be an expression of my vanity, but I'd love to be able to look at a series of photos of all the characters I played throughout the whole time I've ever been an actor, and just go, wow, what an array of weird and interesting and different people. Like, I don't want to just get stuck in a wheelhouse, like in a box playing the one thing. To me, part of the enjoyment is the costume of it all.
Joel Edgerton, thank you for joining 1+1.
Thank you very much.
And next time you need an interviewer in one of your films, who are you going to go to?
I think you got blood on your hands, right?